So yeah, I'll come clean. um, I've been kind of presenting a lot of this so far, um, kind of carefully trying to avoid Buddhist terminology, but I guess it's fair enough, and sometimes it's pretty obvious what traditional Buddhist topic that I'm talking about. Um, so here, clearly, this is dissatisfaction, very fundamental Buddhist idea, the very first thing that the Buddha spoke about. But it's not a Buddhist idea, obviously, is it? I mean, we all know that's a reality in everyone's life. It's not some Buddhist concept, so no secret. However, the reason I wanted to lead you through that meditation in the way that I did was because I think it's true that we don't recognize, we're not really fully aware of how much dissatisfaction there is in our lives. So if you are thinking, goodness me, there's a lot, it's not just you, okay? And often it's kind of in the background, and we sort of, we screen it out in one way or another, or we may feel it very intensely at the time, but then we quickly forget, and we think everything's hunky-dory most of the time. People say, how are you doing? And you always say fine. Sometimes we know we're not fine, but usually often anyway, we think we are. But actually, if we were to look carefully and see how much dissatisfaction there is in each day of our life, we might begin to wonder whether, am I as fine as I thought? And it's not a gloomy conclusion. The reason for wanting to look at this, and the reason for wanting to bring more awareness to it, is because if we have greater awareness of where things are not as we'd like them to be, it gives us more opportunity to change that. But what's true is that if we examine our stream of thought, stream of consciousness, a lot of the time it is focused on problems, isn't it? There's one problem or another that I'm trying to grapple with, and of course, we can view a problem doesn't have to be something that makes us unhappy, but we do get unhappy about our problems quite a lot. So whether you classify it as something spiritual or not, which is, not really, in a way, maybe not such a significant question, but we clearly would like to, or most of us, I think, are very clear that we would like to have greater ability to resolve our problems, or to not be upset by them, not be bothered by them, to overcome them, and to achieve our goals. So, one area of dissatisfaction that I tried to bring out in the meditation, again, is that we often don't, most of us, we have goals or ambitions or intentions that we don't manage somehow to bring to reality. Something gets in the way, whether it be external or internal obstacles. And often we don't quite understand why. Why didn't that work? Why did I not get the result that I wanted? So, and this can bring about a somewhat passive attitude that, well, I've tried so many times to create these positive results, and it hasn't worked. And this can be very unconscious. I mean, it's not necessarily that we're consciously having that thought, but we may cease to aspire for things that we used to aspire to, because we've concluded that we're unable to succeed. Or we may just decide to live with problems that may be quite serious, because we've made great efforts to overcome them and we haven't succeeded. So this is continuing the theme of motivation that we've spoken about, already, because again, it's said very clearly in Buddhism, and it's not a Buddhist idea. It's just very clear that and straightforward, logical, really, that if we want to achieve certain results in our life, whether they be spiritual or material, or in terms of our relationships or creativity, career, whatever it might be, if we have a very clear and strong motivation, much more likely that we will succeed. So if we experience repeated disappointment, then it can chip away at that. It can erode our motivation. And so that's one reason I wanted to explore this area of disappointment, and to begin looking at, well, what gets in the way? Yeah, presumably, if I have these aspirations or results that I want to create, if I'm, more than 10 or 12 years old, they're likely to be moderately realistic. They're not like them. They might occasionally kind of come up with an ambition or a goal that is way out of what's possible for me. But generally speaking, by the time we're adults, we're not likely to do that very much. However, I think many of us often experience that we had an ambition once and now it's gone because we've concluded that we're not going to achieve it simply because we've tried and failed a number of times. And I think that dissatisfaction, it's very important. And it's common to fall into concluding that it's not important, which is really concluding that we are not important. I conclude that I'm not important. If I completely give up on my goals, my ambitions, my aspirations. And when I say give up, I mean that differently from if I was saying letting go. It's often good to let go of ambitions or aspirations or goals that no longer fit, or that maybe no longer serve us, are no longer appropriate for where we are in our life journey. The goals and aspirations and ambitions that make sense, that are appropriate and healthy and worthwhile and so on, change as we grow older, and not just because we have to give up on, like I was saying, it doesn't make sense for me now to have the ambition to be an Olympic athlete. It doesn't actually make sense for me to have the ambition to be a concert pianist, although probably if I devoted 15 years of unmitigated effort, I might manage to achieve that. But I hardly think it's worthwhile for me to get serious about that now. It's very unlikely. And anyway, the effort involved would be so massive that I leave it to the younger people. But nevertheless, we can fall prey to giving up on goals that are important and lessening our aspiration of what we think we can achieve, in ways that actually are not quite real. Because, as I say, it's very easy to conclude, well, I'm not going to make it because I've tried often and it hasn't worked. And what's true is that we do need, if we want to achieve any goal that's truly worthwhile, we will need a lot of perseverance. We will need to be willing to push through difficulties. We will need to be willing to work at it probably for longer than we originally thought we would have to. And it's very helpful to know this. That makes it less likely that we're going to give up. So coming back to dissatisfaction, of course, we experience physical pain, we experience uncomfortable emotions like fear, anxiety, anger, grief, and so on. We emotional pain, we experience frustration, and those are things that we would rather be without. But then the other aspect that I keep kind of returning to, I guess, is an overall dissatisfaction with my life. I want to shine a light on this because I believe that most people go through life with that general sense of dissatisfaction. That, I'm not getting where I hoped I would get in my life when I was, let's say, 16, 18, 20, and setting out on my life's journey. Some of us may, because of very difficult early experiences, some people give up on life much earlier than that. But a lot of people, whilst I would, perhaps not fair to say that they give up on life, but they give up on their dreams. We tend to give up on our dreams. And I think this is very serious, and it's very important that we, if we have an opportunity, as we're, I'm hoping that we will be doing in this course, to each have an opportunity to work on ourselves and on our life in a different way, to come back to this question that we may, in some respects, it may be particular things, or it may be more general, that, that sense of, and it may not be an achievement in some conventional sense of what people generally consider to be an achievement. Like somebody mentioned, well, is spending time with my family, is that a goal? Well, yes, in the sense that if the question, what are my goals, being framed in the light of, I may not be around much longer, and that comes up as something important, significant, worthwhile, meaningful, to spend time with my family. Maybe just to sit in nature and appreciate the beauty of nature. What do we consider to be truly worthwhile in life? So that question was what was behind the exercise from last week, to look at one's goals. And please don't conclude that what you wrote down, that necessarily is your goal, that what is what you have to do. This is an ongoing inquiry that we can continue, and it's a very useful thing to do. I recommend doing it once a year, looking at my goals in the next few years or whatever. And if you don't want to do it in that, that's also fine. You may not want to have specific goals for specific time periods. You don't have to do it in that way. But to look at, some kind of, maybe, I think to do it seriously once a year is a good idea. Where do I want to go in my life, really? What do I consider to be worthwhile in life? And am I moving in that direction? So this isn't something, I'm sure you can see and understand this. This is not something that I am prescribing to you. This is a question that it makes sense for anybody to ask themselves. So it's not, some kind of injunction that's coming from somebody else, but it's a suggestion that to look more deeply at that question is very valuable. So, yeah, there's a discrepancy between the way that our lives actually are when we look at them and how we want them to be. There's always a gap, I think. There's always a gap. And that's very useful to notice that and think, okay, well, how might I close that gap? And when we look more deeply, especially, you know, with the question that was posed last week, if my life were nearing its end, how would I feel about that gap? Which, you know, what is it that I might suddenly realize that I've been neglecting or not giving enough importance to that actually is very important, you know? So the question then becomes a bit urgent. And this is very significant. If that question, what is that I truly want in life on the deepest level, if that question becomes urgent and important, and we then can gain some real clarity about the answer, this opens up huge potential for our life to be enriched, to grow, to experience, you know, something really significant with our lives, to do something significant and meaningful with our life. So that's the purpose, you know. So I'm contrasting, you know, we're looking at dissatisfaction, okay? And of course, that's very closely connected with the question: what is the source? What would be the basis for true satisfaction, real satisfaction? Okay. And also in the meditation, I wanted to kind of begin an inquiry into so what does get in the way. Because again, this will shed some light on why is there this gap? You know, why don't I manage to achieve all the things that I might set out to achieve or I might want to achieve in life? Perhaps this word achievement is a little bit, you know, might not feel quite that it quite fits for some of you, you know, but it you know, it's creating the conditions, the results in my life that I want to have. So it might be something, you know, not necessarily something that involves great striving and building something very concrete, but it might be more spiritual. It might be, you know, inner peace. This is extremely important. I think this is important for everyone actually, and we'll talk about that quite a lot later in the course. But you know, things of that kind that are not like thought of as big achievements. But nevertheless, if I'm not experiencing that, then what might I do that would lead to that? Or, you know, if I've kind of given up on it and think, well, that's never going to happen, maybe take a second look, because that might not be true. And if it's not true, it's very important to recognize that, isn't it? So, yeah. So this inquiry, you know, what gets in the way? What happens when I form an intention, an aspiration, and I think, yes, I'm going to do this. Like, you know, I mean, I I have this sort of several times a week, actually. I'm going to write a book. I've been meaning to write a book for literally 40 years, and I haven't done it yet. And I still intend to, you know. So I need to look very carefully. What is it that's getting in the way? What's stopping me from doing it? And I can give lots of answers. I mean, you know, I look at this very seriously and quite regularly. And I still have that intention. So it's a useful inquiry. I mean, there are other things that I have had aspirations, ambitions to do that I kept thinking, oh, I'm not managing to do this. I'm never going to do it. And now I have, you know, it's possible to shift, to narrow that gap, to close that gap. So we're going to look, more as we go through on the relationship between intentions, actions, and results. And we'll look quite a lot at that, those questions, that relationship between those things next week. But this is something very clear, to me anyway. You may not agree. Many people go through life thinking that happiness, which is that's a word that may be a very useful word, but it also can be a bit ambiguous and maybe sometimes not as useful as it might look. So I rather prefer satisfaction, true satisfaction. But people go through life thinking, well, happiness or it's good fortune. Is this something that happens to me or not? It's not really. I just do my life and I do what I have to do every day. And either I win the lottery or I don't, or either I find the right my dream partner or I don't. I kind of put it on the internet and the right person doesn't respond. Or I think I found the right person and then it's not the right person, and that was that always happens to me. Life is happening to me, and maybe one day I'll be happy and maybe I won't. It's not usually I'm happy now and I've been happy for many years and it's just happened. No. Sometimes one is happy. If one has that perspective on life, that life happens to me and happiness or unhappiness, good fortune or misfortune happens to me, and I'm not the one in control, and I'm not the one in charge. If I have that perspective on life, then although I may feel happy for a short time when something good happens, very likely that I'm going to be considerably less than happy most of the time. Happiness or satisfaction is something that we have the power to create. We have the power to create it. And that's, kind of core idea in this course that I want to explore with you. Because we very easily, very often fall into feeling, no, I don't have that power. It's not in my hands. This event happened. It was terrible. There's nothing I could have done about it. And I can't be happy because this has happened. Or this hasn't happened. And it should have happened. And then, I can't be happy. I mean, I'll give an example which might strike a deep chord for some of you. But if, for instance, if I'm a woman, and I mentioned this is, it can happen to men too, actually, but it's certainly more prominent with women. And I very, very much want to have a child, and I've not been able to, and it's getting too late, and it gets too late. Some women, it's not so liable to happen to men like that because we can become. I could become a father now, 66. If I was a woman, I would not be likely to become a mother. So it can be devastating. This, which is what would give meaning to my life, is never going to happen. So I am a victim to life, then, if that's how it is for me. And I don't want to sound unsympathetic. because I think that can be really devastating. There are other things, like when I was 15, I really wanted to be a concert pianist, well, a musician anyway. Um, I realize now that I didn't want it as much as a real musician once did, actually. But, I could have, blamed my father, who had a rather sort of, pessimistic view about how likely it is that somebody like me would achieve that. So I didn't pursue my ambition. And I could be better for the rest of my life. That doesn't make any sense, really, does it? There's lots of other things I can do that are worthwhile. It's very, you know, it's very good to look and keep looking at what do I really most deeply think that is truly worthwhile, and then to decide, no, I'm not going to compromise on that. Even if I've acquired the habit of thinking that I'm, you know, not very likely to do anything much of significant in my life, if that's been my, that my childhood conditioning or whatever, has brought about such an attitude, then I really, encourage you to question it. We all have incredible potential, and it's possible to realize that potential. We don't have to go through life just experiencing dissatisfaction, but there will always be some, We're not going to, whatever we do, we're not going to get to that place where I just rock and roll through my life and everything's fine all the time. Not in this life anyway, I don't think. So we can, but if we find the things that uh, are truly important to us and we pursue those things as best we can, then we have no reason to be dissatisfied with our life as a whole. So, thank you.